In today's episode,
there are many voices. Sometimes I hear my dad's voice. He kind of sounded like me too. My dad was a narcotics officer, and he in my book that I wrote about my family, I talk about how my dad sounds like 𝐒𝐲𝐿. He was from El Paso. We're Filipino, but we have some Hispanic in there. And, he talked like this, man. And he called me dude. And I would just hear his drunken voice sometimes. That's kind of a voice. But a lot of times it's my own voice.
Okay. Well, the intro said it was going to be three of us, Jeff and I, interviewing Kyle. But unfortunately, Jeff had a last minute issue that came up, issue with the family. And we totally are going to miss him. But the show must go on. So Kyle and I will be working on today's episode here with each other, and I'm really excited about this one. This is going to be the first of three where we're going to be interviewing one another. I went to ChatGPT and fired off a handful of questions. I've got 20 questions. Some of them are great. I love them. Some of them, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how they work. We'll see how many we can get through. Something tells me this is going to be a long episode. I'm really excited about this. But today's show is say hello to Kyle.
Hello. I'm glad to be here. We missed Jeff, but you and I have known each other long enough. We run into each other in town, and this happens. So
absolutely,
this feels like old days.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, let's dig in, and I'm gonna grab the first question is gonna be it was the weirdest one that I could find in the list of 20, and I just loved it. It was under the creative and reflective category, it's number 19 if you want to try to look it up in what I sent you over, but it's if imposter syndrome had a voice or a persona, what would it sound like, and how would you talk back to it?
Oh man, I saw that question on there. I can't believe you're starting with that one. That one kind of blew my socks off. Actually,
Woo!
I was a little shocked to see. I was pretty shocked to see this question. There are many voices. Sometimes I hear my dad's voice. He kind of sounded like me too. My dad was a narcotics officer, and he in my book that I wrote about my family, I talk about how my dad sounds like 𝐒𝐲𝐿. He was from El Paso. We're Filipino, but we have some Hispanic in there, and he talked like this, man, and he called me dude, and I would just hear his drunken voice sometimes. That's kind of a voice, but a lot of times it's my own voice that I hear. And often, recently I've had some success here, but I'm not really good at talking back to it. I usually mentally cower to it and subscribe to it and make it my belief system for a short amount of time, and then I finally snap out of it. But I haven't gotten to the point where I'm good at really the self-talk thing or whatever it is, whatever mechanism people use. I'm not there yet. I have to almost go through a process where it almost leaves my system, and then I'm good to go again. But I do need to get better at tools to fight it on the spot, because I think I talked about on the intro episode about how imposter syndrome's led me down some bad decisions or making irrational decisions that have curtailed my growth and development and goals, which that's getting better, but I still have a lot to do. But, sometimes, a lot of times it's my own voice. I can hear myself talking down to myself in my mind.
Yeah, I love it. That is such I think there's so much telling about the fact that, it's your dad's voice, good or bad. I know it's probably complicated in that regard, but the fact that was, I was thinking more of what does it sound like wah, wah, or, is it angry? Is it mad? But I mean, you went real specific with that. That's pretty awesome. Also have to point out, Earache My Eye, the Cheech and Chong album. I found my way back to it. I think maybe there was a Christmas song on it, or they were playing one of the songs from it. And I was listening to something on the radio, and they were talking about that old album, Earache of My Eye, Cheech and Chong. So
Yeah.
got to go dig that one up.
No,
Maybe
no,
we'll try
no.
to. Oh yeah.
No.
Something about my father, he disowned me because I wear my sister's clothes. I don't know if there's a copyright issue.
Shout out to the band Korn, who on their Follow the Leader album had Cheech Marin on, and they did a metal version of that song, and Cheech sings on it. Shout out to Korn for that. That was brilliant.
Well, now I know what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the evening. Thanks, Kyle.
Some Cheech homework.
I get some Cheech homework. All right, so you've recently started a new job, and so I'm going to hop over to one of the personal experiences questions. And the question is, how has imposter syndrome shaped your journey in your career or your creative field? And let's maybe break those down. Let's start with career. I think it's a whole separate question for the creative field with your podcasting, multiple podcasts, your comedy. Man, that's 2 questions. So maybe that's 3, but let's see how far we can get.
Yeah. With the career, I think I talked about this on episode 1, but my climbing of the so-called ladder was very unprecedented and unexpected, and was not on my path. And I kind of got 5-6 years into the career before I stopped and looked around and said, what happened? How did I get here? I was so addicted to the climb and to the newness. Like, I moved here to play music, and business was not in my purview, but somehow it happened. And then I got into it and enjoyed it. And I was able to survive on enjoyment and kind of growth for a while. Like, it kind of sustained me. But then I got to a level where, income jumped, responsibility jumped, all those things started jumping massively. The scale of my impact was jumping. And all of a sudden I'm looking around and be like, I don't belong here. How did I get here? It's like I blinked, and 6 years later I'm in a leadership role, in an international company, and that was, and I'm looking around. I think, what did I call it on the first episode? I was on the plank, on the pirate ship. I was like, all of a sudden the sharks were beneath me, and I don't remember how I got there. Yeah. And that really, career-wise, is how it's happened, because I think it's interesting that that wasn't never my ambition, but 15 years later, here I am in cybersecurity and technology, and that was never really the plan. And I think because of that, it does create that discomfort that generates a lot of imposter syndrome, because I look around at people that went to college for what I do, or people that have a lot more certifications than I do. I have a couple, but they have the main ones. And I just see the people who are seemingly from the outside a lot more, quote unquote, into it. And I think, God, I can never beat that guy, or I can never beat that gal. It's just, and that does generate a lot of discomfort, because somehow I did get to this point, and I still really don't know how. And I think that generates a ton of the discomfort of the imposter syndrome.
You mentioned in the first episode, the doesn't happen when you're just sitting in your parents' basement, right? You're out on that bleeding edge, and there's that weird dynamic of, we're driven to do that. We're that voice inside of our heads there shouting us down. And I think that's the dynamic, is we're trying to prove that voice wrong. So we find ourselves in really strange positions. So I got to throw what's a really bad joke out there. It's the Nashville joke. What is it? What do you do? I'm a musician. And whenever that happens in Nashville, it's like, oh, you're a musician. Really? What restaurant?
Yeah.
But I actually think IT industry, there's something there. I know a lot of folks that incredible musicians that are also, security jockeys, or network guys, or server huggers, or, code monkeys.
Yeah. I know so many. It's unreal. And it's not just in Nashville. Like, so many of my peers are in Carolinas, Texas, and I've met 3 people in my new company already that they're all over the country, and they're musicians. One's a DJ. It's crazy. Like, there is a symmetry there. It's pretty unbelievable.
Well, I think this is going to tie into the comic thing as well. Same question. How has imposter syndrome shaped your journey? We covered career. On the creative field side. Kind of give a little breakdown of just the things that you're in, which so you create such incredible content. But tell us a little bit about why. What was it that imposter syndrome really kind of pushed you, shaped you, moved you towards that creative side?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's funny. I'm glad you separated the two because they are totally different.
Yeah.
I'm very risk adverse in 95% of my life with my money, with my relationships, with a lot of things in my career. I'm very risk averse. Like I would say that I've taken a couple of small risks in my career, but for the most part, I'm incredibly calculated. Like to take a new job is it's hours of research. It's a very methodical. I still do a lot of research in my creative life, but it's to fuel the creativity.
Yeah.
It's interesting because creativity was always a self-defense mechanism for me. I played guitar hours a day when I was a kid because it was my lifeline. Like if I could absorb myself in a Hendrix record and try to mimic it 5 hours a day, it staved off the pain of the childhood I had. But whenever I decided that creativity was what I wanted my life to be in my career, and obviously 15 years later, here I am still trying to sew those pieces together and figure out how to make that actually happen. It became a different thing when you monetize something or are trying to monetize something that is so innate to you. It's a very odd experience. I experienced that in music. Comedy, you don't make a ton of money doing it, so it's not as hard, but for some reason though, I'm a risk taker with creativity. I will wake up. I had a dream. Like I had written this memoir about because I was going through ACA, which is adult children of alcoholics. I was kind of just, when my dad died, and I started keeping this journal, and I always wanted to write. You and I had exchanged a lot about writing, and I had written the memoir. I didn't love it, kind of put it on the shelf. And then I had a dream in 2023. In November of 2023, I had a dream.
Wow.
And I kept having this recurring dream. And I was like, that's the ending of the fictionalized version of this book because I want to be a fiction writer. So I literally rewrote the book. I rewrote 80,000 words in 3 months. It's just like,
and it was all around an ending that you dreamt.
Yeah, that I kept dreaming. I was like, that's the version. That's the version. And it was like, but and this isn't an arrogant thing, but this is the truth that you and I both know. How many people we know that haven't written the book?
Yeah.
So many people have a book in them or a song in them or a comedy bit. For some reason, that doesn't ever occur to me.
Yeah.
Like when I decided to get into comedy 10 years later, here I am. And I take breaks because I'm old and I have 4 kids, but I jump back in and I'll do 10 gigs in a month. I'll get booked. And that part's not the part that bothers me. What bothers me is the imposter syndrome that kicks in when the book is finished and I'm then pitching it to agents. That's when I'm like, well, the writing part was really easy. It was easy from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. to write thousands of words every day to finish this book, and it's 2 a.m. and I'm thinking I could keep going. I got 30 more minutes in me, but then you get to pitching. You're like, why am I doing this? And I got rejected by 250 literary agents before I found my agent. Like that process was like, you talk about imposter syndrome. It's like every time I sent the email, it's like, you idiot, what are you doing? Like, why are you, these people don't want your book. Why did you spend all that time? I walk myself out on the plank more so creatively, like jumping on stage, making the thing, creating the thing. That's not the hard part. It's just the 5 months later, the post-mortem on that decision that kills me.
Man, you've heard me talk about Scott Galloway a lot, so I've got to bring up something that a couple things that he said that I think hit on so many levels of what you just said. One thing he said, every year we get people in that present to our students, and they always say something really stupid. And the stupid thing they say is, follow your passion. He's like, that's the dumbest advice you can give somebody. And quite frankly, it's typically given by somebody that's already a billionaire and they made their money in insurance or pig iron. And I love that concept and what he goes on to say is, follow something that you're really good at and let that fuel your passions. Let it fund your passions, whatever it might be. And you're so right that how many people never put the pen to paper? How many people never grab a mic and say, we're doing a podcast? And I don't know what kind of craziness it is that makes us do these things, but the fact that we're doing it, it's such an imposter syndrome thing. There's so much of that tied into it that we're doing these things. We're not giving ourselves credit for it. We're questioning why we're doing it in the first place. We don't believe that we should be an author. We, say, well, I'm a writer, not an author, because, I haven't got published, but I'm also not any good. I don't have any talent, but yet we do. And how inherent to the imposter syndrome dynamic than what you just said about that. So, man, I appreciate you sharing that with that.
Yeah, sorry, it was long-winded, but no, it was. I love talking about creativity and imposter syndrome. Like that is that's a very interesting intertwining for me.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna segue over into out of the creative side. May come back because of what you just said, but one thing I heard you say a couple times. You mentioned the Hendrix and, getting on a guitar and just wailing on it for 5 hours as a coping strategy. So going over to coping strategies, the question I'm going to ask is, are there any mental exercises, habits, or routines that help you manage feelings of inadequacy? And if I'm forecasting right, I think this is going to bring us right back to creativity, but don't let me lead you there. If we go there, great. But what do you do? What do you do to cope?
Definitely make more things. And this is going to be cliche, and I hate how often this phrase is, but continually improving helps me a lot personally. I find that the podcast, we'll shift to that. Now people are listening like, this guy's a jack. Like, what is he doing? He does all these things. Like, who is this stupid person? I know. Yes, I know. You don't have to say it out loud. I know. But the podcast, it's like that one has been fun for me because it's different than comedy and writing because it's measurable comparatively. Like the thing is I can go and kill it and do a 10, 15 minute set and kill it, make very little money. And then on that same night, go do a second gig in a different room and die on stage doing the same material the same way. In that way, comedy is insanely unpredictable and not good for your self-esteem, not good for your mental wellness. With podcasting, I do all the marketing. I produce it. I edit it. I have complete control, and I see the numbers go up every week. And I see like I'll experiment with something new, and I will see the ripple effect of it. Not all the time. It's it's hit and miss, but there are a lot of things I'll do. I'll research. I'll be like, I will when imposter syndrome sets in. Sometimes the way I cope with it is, well, maybe I just need to get better at something. Like in that relief of, whoa, I just improved it by investing in research. Now that doesn't always work, but for me, that is something that does help. Is well, how can I improve it to get better and beat the voice? It's almost like you're racing the voice. And so that helps me a lot. Is just making sure that I'm always trying to move the needle, even if it's a centimeter. Just moving it forward.
Love it. Can I give a little shout out? Can we talk a little bit about it? Let's plug it.
Please. Yes.
Movie Wars is the name of the podcast. You can find it on all of your favorite platforms. Follow, like, subscribe. But I went and I'd listened to it passively a while back. You had shared it with me. This was maybe a year, maybe even 2 ago. Thanksgiving Day, and this would be Thanksgiving of 2024. I listened to it in earnest, and it was one of the Mad Max episodes. And man, I tell you, you mentioned the preparation. It's like, what better level confidence builder than preparation? Like that. There's something to be said for that piece of it. And that's not my style. I'm not a natural organization guy. I'm not a natural prep guy. I like to fly by the seat of my pants. But I've found, myself as a coping mechanism that to do a little pre homework. Now there's a danger that I overthink it and I over engineer it. And it's because I don't trust myself or it. And sometimes it's like, you got the framework, you got enough. Now get in there and just, riff and do the thing. So there is a balance. But I tell you what I experienced when I was listening to that. I was going between families and I was listening to it and I was riveted. I loved it. And the level of detail that you had put in, I could tell you didn't just show up and start recording. You would put the work in, you would put the effort in, you put the time in. And so I'm sure there's something really cathartic about that piece of it, about the preparation work itself. I mean, I'm seeing that a little bit myself. And then to walk away from something and to know, like, I may have the voice in the back of my head, but I nailed that. I know I nailed that. I can doubt myself, but I know I nailed that. If you didn't do that on that episode and it was the Furiosa one, you really should have. You really should have.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words and adult content warning for those, just in case this is a business podcast. If they go over, they're like, "Oh my gosh," it's a bunch of stand-up comedians. But no, I appreciate the kind words, and there is really a catharsis in the knowledge and the mapping of the knowledge and kind of painting the picture behind the picture. It's very addictive, and I love turning on the microphone and just being able to just blah, and just the talking's not the hard part, but once the knowledge is there, I love sharing the knowledge. And honestly, I love seeing the reaction of the knowledge from other people that did, and I'm doing it with some very smart, these co-hosts are smart, movie loving people, and seeing their eyes go, whoa, it's like, yeah, that quiets the voice for at least a day.
All right, I'm going to come to the next question, but I do have to mention the gear shift and the pedal. I'm talking straight to the listeners on this one. Kyle goes into this description of the meaningful intentionality put behind these little pieces on a gear shift in one of the Mad Max vehicles, one of the if you've seen it, one of the cars, and I think one of the trucks.
It's the war rig and Fury Road.
The war rig, yeah. Man, the level of attentiveness, that didn't come from watching it once while the kids were playing in the background. That's the preparedness, and just that was something that I enjoyed so much. And so I'll say I'm very happy to celebrate the enjoyment I've had of this incredible podcast called Movie Wars, which actually ties into our next question. So, what do you do to celebrate when you have successes? And what do you do to keep from how do you avoid attributing them to either luck or external factors, somebody else? I had two guests on that were incredible, and that's really why I was able to shine. It wasn't me, it was them. And, how do you celebrate your successes when you nail something like we were talking about? And how do you avoid, either letting yourself talk yourself down or attributing it to things that you're not giving credit where credit's due? How do you do that?
Oh man, I that's such a specifically interesting question, because that is definitely a journey I've been on. Most of my life, I have attributed things to luck or whatever you want to call it, destiny or whatever, but one thing, if you invest in one thing for a long time, call it a podcast, call it comedy, whatever the thing is, and you have some level of talent combined with hard work and work ethic, just watch the trend line when you put your most into it and when you don't, and you'll see the change. That's one thing that finally clicked with me. And I'm not saying there's luck involved in a lot of things, especially the things I try to get into. Again, imposter syndrome comes from the fact that I just jump headfirst into things that 1% of people on this planet make a good living doing, and I just decide one day I'll do them too for minimal money. Yep. But one thing that helped me, going back to one of my comments earlier, is that when you put your all into something and maybe you have an off week. I have 4 kids. Off week happens all the time. I had flu in my house for 3 weeks. And then I finally got it 2 weeks later. Somehow it delayed and I couldn't do as much content. You know, I do social content every day. I wake up at 5:30 a.m. and before everyone else wakes up, and I make content. I edit my podcast, and then I get up and make breakfast for the kids, and I work, you know, a long day. But I get up early to do it. I couldn't do it when I had the flu, and I saw the numbers go down. And for me, that was a good reminder that your work is reflected. And there is luck in the world, but there's also this really big element of like when you don't push the pedal down, going back to Mad Max, pushing that pedal down, like you do decelerate. And so that sounds negative, but actually it's positive because actually I'm looking at saying when I work and when I do invest, I see the results of it. And that doesn't happen all the time. In fact, in my career, I have had a lot of times where I felt like I'm working so hard and not actually seeing that return. But I don't own that entity. I don't control that entity. You know, I'm reporting to someone. This is my podcast, though. I set the goals. So, but in my own career, in my own creative career, I have seen what happens when I don't put everything into it. And it reminded me, okay, it's not all luck. Like you put your best foot forward and you see the tangible results. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And, you know, I think about, you invited me to a comedy event, local cigar bar here, in this tiny little town of ours, strangest place I've ever been to. It was like going to a different city in a different time, in a different, like it was like just this warp at the front door that you went into to go into this place. Such a cool place. I hate that it's gone. But when you invited me, I had never done comedy before. I think, you know, I don't know what you were thinking, but it was such a great experience. And, you know, once I got up and I feel like I was kind of funny. I got some great laughs. I enjoyed myself. I didn't suck. You know, I felt like I was actually pretty good. You're
very funny.
Well, I had, you know, in the car, talking to myself, you know, watching as people drive up next to me, looking over, you know, kind of crazy. I think this may have been, you know, when like speakerphones through the Bluetooth weren't quite as much a thing. And so I had a lot of people looking at me like, what is going on? But I obsessed over it, you know, and I wanted to be good at it. And I worked on the material and I practiced material and, you know, I was actually good. And then I didn't prep, didn't plan, didn't do what I should have. And it just sucked. It was awful. It was horrible. So, you know, what a great correlation there that, you know, there is talent, but there's also preparation. You know, there's a Jordan analogy about, you know, Jordan walked in the door with the talent of Jordan, but he didn't get to be Jordan without, you know, however many thousands of shots that he had to take to get there and practice that he had to do. So, well, I think you know, the celebration piece, that is such an interesting topic of conversation for those of us that, you know, talk ourselves down for those that struggle with imposter syndrome, because it is something that you have to do. And, you know, it can feel trite and it can feel contrived and it can feel, you know, arrogant. And, you know, it's like it creates those triggers that get you doubting yourself, so you stop doing it. But the idea of a brag book or something like that, you know, it's so important. And social media, for all of its ills and all of the negative crap that it brings to society, I will say one thing is, if I write my wife little love notes for her birthday every year, and I'll post that on Facebook. I really try to make it genuine, but I also let myself get as flowery as I want to, as like just no shame in it. Today's her birthday and I'm just going to bear it all and try to bleed all over it. And I get feedback, and man, what an incredible, you know, dose that I get out of that. Now, I want it to be all about her, but it's a pretty nice little output. And, nothing gets me going quite as well as my wonderful wife. So,
That's beautiful.
yeah, it's social media.
Yeah.
It ain't all bad, I guess. Ain't all bad.
Yeah, and
So
you have to celebrate. Like, it's mandatory. Can we just say that? Like, and I'm only saying that because I punish myself typically. That is when I make a mistake, I make sure that no one is more punished for that mistake than myself. Like, I am, short of physically punishing myself, I am making sure that I feel all the guilt for whatever the failure was.
Yeah.
I actually say celebrate small things, because when you're in your own lane, maybe not in the corporate world, but when you do own a thing, when you own the Impodsters or whatever your comedy, like, the amount of work that goes into a very small success is exponential. So get a cigar. That's what I say.
I love it. Episode 2. What a milestone. Let's celebrate the fact that, we didn't, after the first one, just go, God, we're going to put a bullet in this thing's head.
You just keep going.
Episode 2. Let's celebrate it.
I love it.
So, there's so many questions. You're making this more and more difficult because, I want to stick with the creativity piece. I want to stick with the celebration piece. I think one thing though is, we have listeners that are looking for tips and tricks and things. So, let's move from the anecdotal and let's go into some maybe tactical things. And so when you're looking at overcoming and growth, what advice would you give to someone who is experiencing imposter syndrome for the very first time, and you now notice it, you see it in them, you recognize it? Maybe we could take it down the path of maybe someone that's typically very confident, but they find themselves in a situation that's not my favorite form of imposter syndrome, but it's there. The other might be just the first time you recognize it in someone that you may have thought was a very confident person, but then you kind of see the inner, demons that they're struggling with imposter syndrome. Whichever direction you want to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, first I would say congratulations. It means you probably have just done something or initiated something in your life that has pulled you out of your comfort zone, or has pulled you have moved the needle in some way or form. And it may be small, but somehow you've moved the needle, and now you don't know how to reconcile your success or reconcile the position you find yourself in. So congratulations.
Preach.
Welcome to the club. But I would say if you were having it for the first time, and you probably know this more than anyone because this is your specialty, but like, I hope someone has heard this before that happens, because it's really hard to diagnose this whole thing until someone like you comes along and puts the verbiage and the definition to it. Like, I didn't know what this was for years. I thought it was just wrapped up in depression and anxiety. Like, I didn't know there was this other thing that's very real that people who strive get, which is imposter syndrome. But I would actually say, there are moments in our life where we do require external validation. Our jobs have performance reviews. We need to know that we're being good spouses and good parents. And sometimes there is external validation that happens. But when you're experiencing imposter syndrome, the cause is not probably a thing where you need to go looking for external validation. And I think that's the first instinct a lot of people have. It's like, well, I need to know that I'm in the right place, so let me look outward. The problem is that that's not going to ever work. You know what I mean? And that leads to comparison game. And comparison is like the compendium for for imposter syndrome. It's like, once you start comparing, then you're like inviting everyone else's imposter over. So you're inviting a lot of hurt. So I'm not saying don't look at other people and set goals. There's this kind of a different thing, but when you feel like an imposter, like, I think the worst thing you can do is go to social media, look at the people in your life that you think are doing better than you, and you're literally building a legal case against yourself when you do that. You're taking yourself to court, and you are picking the jury, and you are building the case against yourself when you go out comparing yourself in that moment. Because all you're going to do is find the validation that your imposter wants, which is you are not welcome here and you're not in the right place. It's quite the opposite. You've stepped out and you have moved the needle, and now you don't know what to do with success or the feeling of accomplishment. So you're trying to reconcile it with some level of failure. So I'm not saying necessarily look inward, but I'm just saying don't go compare yourself and don't look for external validation in that moment when you have your first stint of imposter syndrome.
Oh, that's we're gonna have to unpack that just a little bit. I think there was a quote that I heard one time, and it really changed the way I looked at certain things. And the biggest impact it had was when I would have a complaint about life or work or whatever. You have that inner dialogue that goes, "Oh, shut up! You know, look at the starving children in China." You know that we used to be told as our kids. And I heard a quote one time that said, "When you compare, you compound."
Yeah.
And I found that so moving, and I think that's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, when you're comparing the positive things in someone else's life that you covet, and I like that word covet. I think there's a reason why that was the one of the 10 commandments, because of all the negative things that come along with coveting. But when you covet, especially in the age of social media, you're seeing a version of someone that just doesn't exist. No one can be, you know, I am not my social media pages. I am a much better James Salter, one of my favorite authors, says something along the lines of, I like myself a lot better on the page. You know, I like the written version of myself. I like who I am when I write better. But there's no way there. But the other part of that is when we have some pain that we're experiencing, you know, and maybe it's something that there's so many ways that imposter syndrome can attach to this piece of it. Some pain that we're having, something that we experienced, and that imposter kicks in, and it's that sort of shut up, suck it up, that voice. And then it starts comparing. You start comparing of this person's, you know, worse off. What right do you have? And I mean, that's a great imposter phrased question. What right do you have to feel angry, sad, hurt about what you're experiencing? And my wife and I, as we've kind of gotten older, we talk about things with one another, and we'll catch each other, you know, doing that thing where we go, you know, let's stop talking about that. And it's no. You can't compare. When you compare, you compound, especially with pain. And it's okay to feel a large thing about a small thing. You know, this may be a small thing, but it sure is impacting you. And I'd rather let's unpack it and get it out of the way and move on than to just shove it underneath and try to move on. Never works.
Yeah.
Never works. So I love what you said there. Absolutely.
Yeah, we're not taught to do what you just described. That was beautiful what you said, and I love that you're at that point in your relationship, because our culture isn't about that. Depending on how you're raised, I mean, I think it's a very small sliver of American society that may have been raised in a way that is healthy enough to address the pain in that way. I think a lot of people don't have that pathway, you know, and that's what leads to a lot of the things we're talking about. So I love what you just said there.
Well, I will Oscar Wilde many occasions on this podcast. I'll throw something out there that I absolutely heard somewhere else. I like to think that I'm a pretty original guy, but so much of what I have to say is just something that someone else has already thought up. But I'll be out there catching.
That's why they're the greats.
That's why they're the greats. Oscar Wilde is my favorite. Is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. So back to some of those kind of tactics and coping mechanisms. You shared a little bit about some of the ways that you celebrate success. You know, the avoiding attributing to luck or external factors. You talked a little bit about the type of advice you might give to someone experiencing imposter syndrome for the first time. You know, when it comes to tactics, let's talk about mentors, coaches, peers. When in episode 1, we kind of dug into that a little bit, and we all talked a little bit about some of the people that have impacted us over the years. But what role do mentors, coaches, or peers play in helping you manage imposter syndrome? And then, give us a useful example, a tactical example of something that you were given maybe that helped you fight imposter syndrome.
None of the mentors I've had have necessarily known about imposter syndrome, but I definitely can tell you that they had experienced it. My best mentor I ever had, he's retired now, and I still keep in touch with him. His name is Perry. He's an amazing man, and he when he was my mentor, he was like in his 60s, about to retire, and he was a high-ranking VP in healthcare here in Nashville. He's a beloved guy out here in Nashville. And, but even though he probably maybe didn't know, well, I wouldn't be surprised. The man has a library in his house, and he's read every letter on every page in that library. He's very much a genius. But what I did experience from him was just the wisdom and the age of him being in his 60s. And when we were meeting, I was in my early 20s and mid 20s and had newly married and a baby on the way, and very stupid. Just very immature, very selfish, very inexperienced. And meeting him on the cusp of that was really cool, because he had not only had the time to experience, but to heal from it and to grow from it. And that is really the only thing that age can teach, or it's the only thing that can be taught by age. And it can't be really replicated any other way, because we're all I have a lot of friends that have teenagers. My oldest kid is 10. And I can give you advice on changing a diaper and raising a 5-year-old, but I don't have a teenager, and that's where my knowledge stops. So for me, even though maybe imposter syndrome probably wasn't a term that was popular in his, the meat of his career, he definitely had been around long enough and was wise and sage enough to have healed from such a condition. And, there's such a confidence and a simplicity behind the advice he would give that just would only come from a person that has seen a lot and done a lot. And, of course he was raised, by Navy World War II veterans. So that's a whole other thing. But, I would just say that, when you're seeking mentors, don't discount the 60, 70-year-old in your life. It's really tempting to go find that high performer 10x, those people that use the language we're going to 10x the business, entrepreneurs. Those are great too. But for this, what we're talking about, find someone that has not just experienced, but healed and has grown, and that's the only thing I would say about mentorship in this thing. There's no shame in finding someone that's experienced 60 to 70 years of life on you,
So it's so telling that, and so, so typically imposter syndrome, that what you said about, I'm not sure that any of my mentors even knew, and I would argue that's probably the first thing that you should say. And a lot of times now it's what is it? Walked into a bar. I was at a bar, and a runner, vegetarian, and a Mormon all come in. I know, because they all told me within the first 5 seconds. I'm that guy about imposter syndrome. So I'm initially just coming right out of the gate with imposter syndrome. And, I think it helps, especially with anybody that's trying to provide me with any type of mentoring and coaching, what better frame to give them to say, look, this isn't only me, but it kind of touches everything about me. You need to understand it. And then let's go talk about other things. Let's try to grow away from it. Let's not dwell on it or stay stuck in it. I heard a while back someone say, I don't care about 40 under 40. You want to impress me? Show me, a group of 60-year-olds or a group of 70-year-olds that are starting their first entrepreneurial endeavor, or kicking up a podcast. Or I think there was a guy at one of the comedy shows that it was his first time doing stand-up, and he had to be in his 60s. And he got up there and he was awful.
Yeah,
but he
absolutely.
did it. He did it. He got up there and did it. And those are more impressive things. And I think the amount of experience that, and it is true. There's something about life experience and wisdom that, you can be precocious, you can be, smart, intelligent, but until you've gotten the snot kicked out of you repetitively, there's some lessons you just won't learn.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, my father-in-law, he's an entrepreneur in Nashville, and he's an amazing man. And I remember when I was younger and my car, like, if car would have an issue, or, when you're married and you have a house and the first time something breaks down, and it's like that first shock of owning a house, and like you're out $1,200 that you don't have. Like, I remember he just like kind of looked at me with a plain face. He wasn't even fazed by my concerns. He was just like, well, your wallet always can smell when you have, or so what did he say? He's like, life always smells when you have extra money in your wallet. And he walks away. I was like, is that all you got? Is that all you got for me? It's like, but he's in the catering business, and he is like, he is taking his licks, man. I mean, he was in catering during the recession. This is a guy who has survived, and, and I remember that phrase is always stuck in my head, because I'm like, that's a man who has seen things and done things,
So I think this is probably going to be our last question. And I don't know if I'm doing the right thing here, because I feel like this question could be like an entire episode. It's like an hour-long conversation in just one question. But you've touched on it a little bit already in conversation. And it's about culture and upbringing. You mentioned, Filipino, I think the area of the country that you were from. You talked a little bit about some of those cultural things and upbringing. That's a big, large word, but can you give an example of a time, a situation, or maybe something that was extended over a period of time, but it was where culture or upbringing really impacted your personal experience with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, man. I mean, gosh, I don't want to get too dark. I think I've already shared my childhood experience, but there's a story from my childhood that I think about a lot. It's really funny. Like, I experienced physical abuse, alcoholism, poverty. I experienced a lot of those things. Squalor is a better word for it. Squalor. But the things that stick with me weren't necessarily the blows that I took, and the verbal blows that I took. There were things like, my dad was always way too drunk to want to help me with school, and he was usually on stings. He was an undercover cop. He was out. But I do remember, like, when I would fail something, getting beatings. And the reason I remember those ones is because it's like I was struggling to just be present in school. And my guitar was the only thing keeping me in life, just to be really frank with you, was just, listening to records and pretending that I'm playing them. That was like my life. That, and like we had an antenna, and the only channel I got was Seinfeld reruns at night. That helped me a lot too. Hail Jerry. But man, I'm sorry, I'm getting way too dark here. But
no, this is the good stuff, man. This is the real stuff.
I think, and hopefully listeners have experienced something along those lines, because that stuff is what down the road generates imposter syndrome. Because I needed help, and I wanted to succeed. But the punishment, it's funny, the in-between pieces to get me there weren't there. The support, the love, the nourishment that you would want from your father weren't there, but the punishment was. And so the way that has happened later in life for me is that the punishment is very severe for myself, and it's frequent, and it may not even be a big failure. It's like, well, I could have done that better. And that if I'm not careful, that can become an untamed beast. And that's how my upbringing shows up a lot in this area, is just that I feel that need. It's not just an imposter. It's an imposter with like like in wrestling with a steel chair, coming over the head, and I hate that, because my imposter is very aggressive, very angry. And that is because of my upbringing. And I hate it too, because sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in, that can spill out into my family too. I can overreact to very small things, because I'm trying to distribute the burden of that punishment that I'm putting on myself. So that's the biggest way. And I think people who grow up with whether it's trauma or family hurt or that level of detachment from their father, when the person that's supposed to be the loving force in your life is the destroying force, it's never going to work out well in this area. So for my upbringing, that's definitely a huge part of it. And I think it's also just unorthodox when your dad's living is to pretend to be a drug dealer and look like a drug dealer and talk like a drug dealer, and he called me dude. I mean, that was my name, was dude. So, there's all kinds of, weird associations from that period. But I would say if I could think of one example that persists, it's that very specific, like, bringing home bad grades, even after trying your hardest and just struggling, and no one's there to throw you a life preserver and you're on your own. That's going to set you up for imposter syndrome, because when you do, you can go one of two ways. You can go the drug addicted jail route, or you can be like me and some very few people I know, which they develop a work ethic to get the heck out of here. And that's great. You strap on the rocket boosters and you get out and you go, but then you find yourself on the pirate plank because you went so fast out of there and you went headlong into something. But then you find yourself like you've been just going 100 miles an hour, and then you haven't reflected, and then you question why you're where you are. It's a weird cycle. So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, it does. There's so much in there that I understand Point Break. Kyle and I were having a conversation earlier, and we were talking about movies, and Point Break came up. Totally get Point Break and why you would enjoy it so much now. But yeah, I think I also understand the plank concept. You've mentioned that a couple times, and I think I'm getting that a little bit more and more. There's a richness to that imagery that I'm understanding more and more. And, I'm seeing where I've done it, where I've been walking the plank, sometimes at the tip of a cutlass, being pointed out, but also sometimes, with the knife reached around, sticking myself in the back. But, no, I want to apologize to anyone listening that you only got me today. Unfortunately, Jeff was not able to join us. So I apologize that you only got me and didn't have the richness of the three of us together. Jeff, I do want to say we missed you on today. The show must go on. We decided to go ahead and move forward. We're looking forward to having you back on the next one. But Kyle, I just want to thank you. The honesty, the openness. You told me a long time ago, you said, when it comes to a podcast, like, if something changes about the podcast, just go with it. Like, just go with it. And if you change the format entirely, just go with it. And I think initially this was going to be a more business oriented podcast. I don't think that's going to be possible. I think it's going to be something that it's just personal. And this ties into something that I've told people before. When I hear them talk about work-life balance, I have something that I say a lot of the times, and it's, there is no such thing as work-life balance. There's only life and where you choose to spend it. And that's become a lot easier as I've gotten older and gotten more accomplished. And at one point in time, like, I would have been like, we don't always get to choose where we spend life. But I do think it's a good thing to shoot for is, it's not work-life balance. It's life and where you choose to spend it. And so I think this podcast will become more and more it's just a conversation about imposter syndrome. And it's going to be a conversation about people, about us. And Simon Sinek says, if you don't understand people, you don't understand business. So maybe it is a business podcast after all. But thanks everyone for joining today. Kyle, again, thank you for the depth and the honestness and the vulnerability and the willingness to just kind of put it all out there. I've mentioned before, I hope that one person has listened. I hope that more people than one person have listened at some point in time, but I hope that one person has changed, or we either continue or further a conversation about imposter syndrome with the people that tune in. So Kyle, thank you for this. Much appreciated. Look forward to sitting in the chair one day soon myself. Next up will be Jeff. We'll get him knocked out on the next go round. But yeah, man, thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. This is a blast. Anytime we get to chat's good.
Loved it.
Love it, man.
All right.